You think this is finished? The council chamber froze. Chase Dalton stepped forward, a slip of paper in his hand, smirk sharp as glass. The Whitmans filed an injunction at dawn, he said. That wall, your precious wings, comes down in 3 days. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sloane's pulse thundered. Malik's hand brushed hers, steady, but his eyes burned. 3 days, that was all they had. She had always liked the hush of elevation, the way noise softened beneath glass and steel, how streets turned into tidy patterns when you looked down on them. Sloane Hartley, thick, curvy, and impossible to ignore even in a simple silk blouse, stood in the corner of her office, 31 floors above Riverton's waterfront, scrolling through a calendar packed with investors, launch teasers, and glossy brand shoots that smelled like leather interiors and new money. Her life ran on concierge speed, German engines, black card swipes, reservations that materialized like magic. It was efficient. It was safe. It was also starting to feel like a room without air. Quick brief before your 3 o'clock, her assistant said, slipping through the door. City Outreach wants a community arts component attached to Harbour Row. They suggested a local muralist. Name's Malik Jordan. Press says he works with kids, won a few grants. You want me to send a boilerplate contract? Sloane took the folder. A dozen photos slid out, walls turned into breathing things. A girl with a crown of sunflowers, a steelworker's hands cupping a bird mid-flight, a river stenciled in blues so layered it felt like it moved. No branding, no taglines, just pulse. The pictures irritated her precisely because they stirred something. Book him, she said, tomorrow morning. He arrived with paint on his knuckles and wind in his hoodie, carrying a roll of drawings under one arm like a conductor with his score. Malik was tall without trying, handsome in the unpracticed way of men who do real work. Dark eyes, steady, presence like a long breath you didn't know you needed. Miss Hartley, he said, shaking her hand. His palm was warm and paint-slick. Sloane felt a jolt she hid with a tight smile. Call me Sloane. Thank you for coming. He looked around the glass office, then back to her. You wanted to talk about a wall. Harbour Row needs a narrative, she began, sliding a mock-up across the table. Clean lines, aspirational living, local connection. We want to commission a mural that makes the condos look like they grew out of community love instead of a tax break, he finished, not unkindly. What do you want the wall to say? Sloane's jaw tightened. She was used to people nodding. We want to celebrate Riverton's spirit. Malik leaned in, scanning the mock-up. These smiles aren't Riverton. They're stock. Real spirit is messier, louder. Sometimes it hurts first. He tapped a blank rectangle where the mural would go. If you hire me, I'll need 3 non-negotiables. The design comes from neighborhood stories, not your tagline. Youths get paid to assist, not just posed for. And the wall goes where people actually walk, not where a drone likes the framing. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it took up space. Sloane felt the old instinct rise, control the narrative, shape the optics. The room waited for her to say no. Instead, Sloane heard herself say, Send me your scope and budget. I'll adjust the deliverables. Malik blinked, surprised by the absence of a fight. You'll come to the workshop, he said, more statement than question. Can't design in a boardroom. I have a 9 a.m. with... Come after, he said, rolling his sleeves. Paint doesn't care about calendars, but kids do. He left a smudge of cobalt on her conference table. She didn't call facilities. The workshop lived in a former corner store with a bell that rang when the wind breathed too hard. Sloane parked her white coupe by habit and immediately regretted it. Not because the block scared her, it didn't, but because the car said too much, too loudly. She smoothed down the skirt that loved her hips and hated humidity, then pushed through the door into air that tasted like turpentine and citrus cleaner. Shoes off at the top, a voice called. A girl in a paint-spattered T-shirt pointed her toward a line of beat-up sneakers and boots. Sloane hesitated, then slipped out of her heels. Barefoot on canvas, she felt ridiculous and suddenly present. Malik stood at a table mixing colour like a prayer. You came. I did. She tried to take the room in without staring. Teenagers trading sketchbooks, a grandmother holding court from a folding chair, a boy counting beats on his knee like percussion. We're mapping themes, Malik said, handing her a pencil. What do you hear when you hear Riverton? She almost said waterfront views. Instead, she listened. A kid named Hugo wanted somewhere safe to practice dance after dark. A girl named Mari wanted her mother to be able to sleep without counting eviction notices in her head. An older man wanted a bench that remembered his brother's name. Sloane wrote, "Safety, home, names we keep." A contractor from her site arrived halfway through, barreling in like a storm in steel-toed boots. "Miss Hartley, didn't expect you here." He glared at Malik. "We can't have you people hanging scaffolds on city property without." Malik wiped his hands and faced him, unruffled. "No scaffolds today. We're drawing. If you want to talk permits, I've got copies on the desk and the city liaison's numbers pinned. We good?" The contractor's gaze slid to Sloane, waiting for corporate thunder. She felt 100 trained phrases line up. Liability, compliance, schedule risk. They tasted like dust. "We're good," she said. "Thanks for checking." Outside, the sky flipped from bright to bruised in an instant. Rain began with no courtesy, hard and slanted. The old bell at the door panicked. Kids lunged for canvases, Malik for windows. Water pushed back. Sloane reached for a stack of charcoal studies, stumbled on the tarp's edge, and a ladder pitched toward her with the momentum of a falling decision. Malik was there before the thought was finished. One hand braced the ladder, the other cupped her elbow, a steadying pressure that didn't assume, didn't grab, just held. The metal settled with a grumble. Water hammered the roof. For a beat, the room narrowed to his breath and the small, startled tremor in her chest. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. She nodded. He let go like a promise he meant to keep. Around them, the kids whooped as someone saved a sketch with a heroic towel. The rain eased into percussion, softer now. The bell at the door calmed. "Storms show you what leaks," Malik murmured, more to himself than to her. "Buildings, people." Sloane managed a laugh that sounded like a different person. "Good thing I'm structurally sound." He looked at her, not at the clothes or the car she'd left outside or the inevitability that money brings, but at her, and Sloane felt exposed and, oddly, unafraid. He moved to the window and lifted the latch, letting the petrichor in. The room smelled like rain and chalk and something wordless. "Come see," he said. They stood shoulder to shoulder while the storm blew itself out. Across the street, a puddle turned into a mirror. In it, the workshop's handmade banner read in shaky, brave letters, "We are still here." "You know this won't be easy," Malik said. "Your people will want pretty. We're going to paint the truth." "My people hired you to paint," Sloane said. "I hired you to tell me what I don't know." He studied her profile as if checking for a crack. She surprised herself by not looking away. The power flickered. The kids cheered like an audience that understood improvisation is half of living. Malik set a fresh sheet of paper on the table and drew 3 quick lines, the suggestion of wings that were more muscle than feather. "Home," he said, tapping the page. "What if we made a place you can carry?" Sloane thought of penthouse silence and dinners where laughter came with a receipt. She thought of the ladder, his hand, the steadiness. She thought of the way the rain slowed when he looked at it like it had a name. When the workshop finally wound down, the air outside felt washed. Her heels dangled from her fingers. Her hair had given up on perfection, and for once she didn't mind. Malik walked her to the door without ceremony. "Same time tomorrow," he said. She nodded, then, without planning it, leaned in, close enough to smell paint and rain and something warm. The words left her before she could brand them, soft enough to be only for him. "Why do I feel safe when you're near me?" She showed up the next morning in jeans and a soft white tee that didn't try to tame her curves, hair in a loose knot that would never pass her mother's inspection. The bell clanged as she pushed through, carrying a bakery box the size of a blueprint. Kids cheered when they saw pastries. Malik just lifted 2 fingers in thanks and went back to chalking lines across the butcher paper. "Fuel," Sloane said, setting the box down. "Bribery for brutal honesty." "You don't need to bribe honesty here," he said, eyes on the sketch. "Just listen to it." She stood beside him as he mapped the mural's spine, a river running left to right, a row of row houses stitched along its bank, and in the centre, a figure not quite human and not quite bird, wings built from small hands, each feather its own story. He drew like someone laying tracks for a train already rumbling toward them. "You changed the wings," she noticed. "They were ornamental before." He said, "Now they're work. You carry them, they carry you." A boy darted up with a crinkled sheet. "Mr. Malik, I drew my daddy's boots." Malik squatted to the boy's height. Treads worn on the heel. Means he stands long. That's detail. That's love. Sloane swallowed. The boots were scuffed, the laces frayed, but the shading hugged them like arms. By midday, sunlight broke across the floor in pale rectangles. Sloane rolled primer on practice panels until her shoulders burned, an ache she welcomed, while Malik walked the room, adjusting, asking, teaching. He rejected nothing. He redirected. When a teen layered too many lines, he didn't say messy. He said, "Find the shape that's hiding." When a grandmother apologized for her shaky hand, he grinned. "Shakes make light. Let it flicker." Between strokes, Sloane texted legal. "We need youth stipends set up as paid apprenticeships. Same hourly rate as site cleanup crew. Also, community centre as fiscal sponsor." Minutes later, her phone rang. Legal's voice was already defensive. "This is off scope, Miss Hartley. The board approved a single commission. Liability. Write the waivers and tell me what insurance you need," she said. "If the board balks, bill me." "Personally?" "Personally," she said, and hung up before she could overthink it. When she told Malik what she'd done, he nodded once, nothing performative. "Money should move like water," he said. "Quiet and useful." She wanted to tell him she'd never been quiet about money a day in her life. Instead, she picked up another roller. That night, she went home paint-streaked and blinking at the city like she'd never seen it at this altitude. Her mother called twice. Her father emailed a calendar invite titled "Course Correction. Urgent." Sloane set the phone face down and watched the river lights braid into one long ribbon. Her apartment felt immaculate and wrong, the silence vacuum-packed. She slept with the window cracked so she could hear a distant siren, a car door, someone laughing on the sidewalk. Proof of life. At dawn, Malik's text found her. "You awake?" She surprised herself by smiling. "On my way." She arrived to find a knot of kids clustered on the sidewalk, faces pinched. A white smear slashed across the center of the wall, a cold stripe of "Keep it clean" in block letters already drying. Someone had stepped in a tray and tracked shoe prints up the base like dirty punctuation. The room went silent for a beat that felt much longer. Murray's mouth trembled. The boy with the boots curled his fingers into his shirt. Malik didn't rage. He set his bag down, opened it, and pulled out rags, solvent, a new gallon of primer. "Okay," he said, voice level. "They wanted to make it smaller. We'll make it stronger." Sloane's throat closed around two words she despised. Of course this happened. Of course the first thing beauty met was control. She grabbed a rag. "Show me where to start." For the next hour they worked shoulder to shoulder. Solvent bit their noses. Primer bit their wrists. Kids watched, then joined, wiping carefully, painting over the scar until it became a ghost, then a memory, then a lesson etched under fresh white. "Why would someone do that?" Mari asked finally, voice small. "Because the wall was telling a truth they didn't want to hear," Malik said, "and because they think clean means quiet." Sloane looked at the girl. "We don't do quiet anymore," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. A beat later, she felt Malik's gaze. Not approval, recognition. The worst of the smear vanished. The rest would be sealed beneath layers that would make it impossible to erase without tearing the wall down. By afternoon, the alley hummed. A food truck parked at the curb sent up the smell of onions and cumin. Someone cranked a speaker low. Sloane's assistant texted a flurry of messages. "Your father asked if you've lost your mind." And a second flurry. "Board wants a sanitized mock-up by Friday or they'll pull the plug." Sloane typed back, "They can pull it. We'll keep going." Her finger hovered over send. She pressed it anyway. A gust of fear rushed through her like standing on a balcony railing. Wind, height, space. Then stillness. The kind after you choose. "Bad news?" Malik asked, not prying. "Honest news," she said. "I told my people they can walk. That's expensive. I've learned to live with expensive." He chuckled softly. "Rich people always say that right before they make the first real choice of their lives." She turned to him. "What was yours?" He didn't answer right away. He dipped a brush in a jar and dragged a line along the primer's edge, crisp and patient. "My mom cleaned houses by the river," he said at last. "I was 12 when a landlord put our stuff on the curb. A neighbor saved her wedding photos by sliding them into a trash bag. Everything else got wet. I decided that day I would paint the things people try to throw away." The line he'd pulled dried like a spine. The next morning brought her father to the workshop door, suit like armour, anger polished. He didn't step onto the tarp. Sloane, outside. She wiped her hands but didn't remove her shoes. "I'm working." "You're resigning," he said, voice somewhere between incredulous and commanding. "Or you're ending this nonsense and coming back to the office to sell the project we have, not the fantasy you've invented." "You hired an artist," she said, acutely aware of Malik and the kids pretending not to listen. "I hired a neighborhood. We're paying them. We're protecting them. We're telling the truth." "Truth?" His laugh was mean. "Your truth is a hobby. Ours pays hundreds of salaries." She felt heat rise, old and childlike. Then it cooled. "You're right," she said. "This isn't your truth. It's mine." He stared at her, looking for the daughter who always came to heel. Not finding her, he went for the jugular. "If you do this, the board will remove you. You'll lose access, your condo, your stipend, everything." "I know. And for what?" he snapped, stepping closer. "For a man who—" She flinched, not because he was right, but because she heard the word before he could spit it. Man as accusation, as category, as a place her father did not want her to go. Malik stepped between them without touching anyone, a line in human form that said stop. "This isn't about me, sir," Malik said, equally calm. "It's about a wall, and a woman making a choice." Her father's lip curled. "Your name isn't on anything that matters in this city." Malik nodded. "That's how I know I'm doing the right work." Silence sucked the air thin. Then Sloane said very evenly, "I'll send my resignation this afternoon. The project is mine to fund. We don't need your board." Her father's face shuttered, fury calcified into something colder. "You don't know how to live without our money." She thought of primer under her nails and a girl drawing a queen with rubber gloves. "I'm learning." He left with the bell screaming after him. Nobody in the room spoke until it finally quieted. Then Mari, solemn as a judge, pressed a sticker into Sloane's palm, a tiny crown scribbled in gold. "For your hard hat," the girl said, "when we climb." That afternoon, a man in a blazer with a paste-on smile arrived from a National Gallery syndicate. He cornered Malik near the paint sink, lowering his voice like a conspirator. "We can move you from walls to canvases, money, shows, residencies. But the urban activism thing, it scares donors. Rebrand. Let us handle your story." Malik wiped his hands slowly, like washing something off that wouldn't stain anyway. "The story isn't mine to sell," he said, and went back to the wall. Sloane watched him refuse a future that most men would have sprinted toward. It didn't look like martyrdom. It looked like alignment. By sunset, outlines covered the primed expanse, graphite shimmering faintly before the first colour went down. Kids took turns tracing the river. Elders corrected architecture details from memory. Someone brought a pot of rice and beans that tasted like welcome. Sloane's shoulders ached and her hands were uselessly beautiful, smudged with sienna and ultramarine. "Unveiling in 2 weeks," Malik said quietly, standing beside her with his arm just close enough that she could feel the warmth. "Maybe 3, if the weather sulks." "2," she said, "before they find a way to pour a parking lot over it." He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw a smile that reached his eyes. "You fight good when you stop using email." She laughed, low and astonished at herself. "Teach me to fight better." "I am," he said. "Look at your hands." Paint had dried into fine constellations across her fingers and wrist. He reached out and brushed one flake free with the back of his knuckle, careful, reverent. The gesture felt louder than any kiss. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm not afraid," she said, and realized it was true. They stood there as the last light caught the wall and turned the graphite silver. A breeze moved through the alley, bringing the scent of damp brick and something flowering from a neighbour's window box. Somewhere, a train sighed. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she echoed. And for the first time in her life, the word didn't mean deadlines or meetings or another rung on a ladder. It meant we'll be here when the sun comes back. The chamber emptied in a rush of whispers and phone screens. Sloane didn't move. 3 days hung between her ribs like a hook. Malik slid the injunction from Chase's fingers without touching him. Eyes on the stamp, filed at dawn, signed by a judge whose name tasted like old money. "Let's go," he said. They walked out into sun that felt disrespectful, too bright for bad news. People pressed close, neighbours, kids, a grandmother in a yellow scarf, asking what now. Sloane made her voice a clear pane of glass. We fight. Back at the wall, Malik taped the injunction beside their banner. We are still here, so no one would have to hear it second-hand. Mari stared at the paper as if she could burn it with her eyes. Devon kicked a pebble hard enough to ping the curb. What do we even do? Mari whispered. We write louder than their paper, Malik said. Tonight we keep watch. Sloane pulled out her phone. The old life still lived in there. Contacts who opened doors. She called none of them. Instead, she texted everyone who had ever brought a casserole to the workshop, every teacher, the nurse who came on lunch breaks, the bus driver who let kids off early at art days. Vigil at the wall, 7 p.m. Bring candles, blankets, witnesses. Then she called a lawyer named Ortega, one name she had saved because he wore scuffed shoes to fancy events. Emergency restraining order. She asked when he picked up. 3 days. We need a judge who believes in breath. I'll try, he said, but the Whitman shop judges like suits. I know, she swallowed. Try anyway. They built the night like a stage that refused to close. By sundown, the block was draped in quilts and courage. Candles bloomed along the base of the mural. Jars cut from pickled glass turned flame into small galaxies. Kids chalked messages that glowed under street lamps. Homes not parking. Truth takes space. A neighbour rolled up with a grill and fed people until the propane wheezed empty. Someone started a hymn and it fell apart into laughter before reassembling as something rougher, fiercer. Sloane Hartley arrived alone, in flats Sloane had never seen her wear. She didn't come close. She stood across the street with her arms folded, watching her daughter take blankets from a stranger, watching Malik teach Mari how to shield a candle from wind with her palm. Sloane felt the gaze like weather. She crossed the street, stopping with a lane between them. It's real, Mom, she said, voice steady. It's more than a wall. I can see that, Eleanor answered, and for once the words didn't come sugar-wrapped. Your father won't yield. He says it's about precedent. He says you'll thank him later. Later has nothing to do with us. Eleanor's jaw shifted. A fight crawled up and died there. Your grandmother painted, she said suddenly, as if betraying a secret. Tiny watercolours of flowers she grew. She hid them in the pantry. Your grandfather called it frivolous. She called it breathing. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Sloane did. She didn't say it. They stood in the hum, the wall behind Sloane flickering like a living thing. Stay, she said finally. You don't have to sing. Just stay. Eleanor stayed. After midnight, the vigil softened into pockets of sleep. Kids curled under coats. Elders nodding in chairs. Malik and Sloane sat with their backs to the brick, candles throwing light up their faces. She leaned into him, her curves tucked into the long line of his body as if the wall itself had hands. I'm scared, she admitted into his shoulder. Me too, he said, but fear is a sign the thing matters. She turned her face into the cotton at his neck, the smell of paint and soap and the day lingering. Why do I feel safe when you're near me? She whispered, not asking for an answer. Because we're both standing, he said, even if we shake. At 4 a.m., Ortega texted a photograph of a stamped filing. Hearing at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Judge Ramirez, not Whitman's usual orbit. Sloane showed Malik. Relief bubbled, small but real. We've got a door, he said. We just have to hold it open. Day 1, the city woke to news of a vigil and showed up with coffee. Reporters circled, careful now, smelling a story with teeth. Sloane gave no speeches. She handed out muffins and pulled Mari's hair into a lopsided bun and answered questions like a person, not a brand. Malik touched up a flower's edge where a candle had kissed it. The grandmother in the yellow scarf told a teenager how to speak from his belly. At 2, the courtroom was thick with bodies and quiet defiance. Judge Ramirez wore her hair in a slicked bun and her robe like armor. The Whitman attorney spoke first, all the right phrases. Safety, economic impact, nuisance, precedent. When he finished, Ortega stood with no slides and very little paper. This wall stopped kids from disappearing, he said. Not statistically, literally. It gave them a place to stand that wasn't the street. The city's own code protects cultural resources under significant community use. The use is happening. You can see it outside your courthouse window. Judge Ramirez turned her head as if she could. Miss Hartley? She asked. Sloane stood, palms damp. I thought rich meant safe, she said. Now I know truth does. If you give them this wall, you are not saving time, you are saving lives. mine included. The judge's pen tapped once, twice. Temporary restraining order granted, she said finally. Demolition paused pending full review. The room didn't cheer. It exhaled like a chest that had been forgetting how. Malik caught Sloane's shoulders and lowered his forehead to hers, both of them shaking a little, candles flickering through the windows as if the city itself had brought its light to witness. Day 2 tasted like reprieve but not victory. The Whitmans filed counter motions. Chase visited the site with a smile that asked to be slapped. Delay doesn't equal decision, he sang, too close to Mari. Malik stepped between them without a word. Chase backed up like a man who had never been taught how to share a sidewalk. The wingworks became a nerve centre. A law student wrote briefs at a folding table beside a tray of empanadas. An architect traced the wall's structural tie-ins to prove that demolition would undermine a shared foundation. A high school science teacher ran tests on the paint's leachate to preempt environmental excuses. Sloane moved among them like a current, fetching staples, writing schedules, wiping tears from a mother's face when she thought of her son's portrait disappearing under latex grey. That evening, Rain flirted and then committed. People crowded under tarps. Sloane climbed the scaffolding with a roll of clear film and began laying it across the top edge, sealing every seam by hand. Malik steadied the roll, their fingers tangled without trying. He kissed her knuckles once, quick like luck. "You're soaked," he said. "I used to pay people to do this," she answered, hair plastered to her cheeks, grin wild. "I never knew what I was missing." Day 3 arrived like a clock striking. Demolition crews idled 2 blocks away. Someone had seen the trucks. The restraining order bought time, but the hearing that would set it in stone or shatter it was hours away. A rumour spread that the Whitmans had petitioned to bypass the overlay by declaring the wall a hazard. "Of course," Sloane muttered. "They always find a word." "We'll find a bigger one," Malik said. The morning turned into a march of small miracles. A union of maintenance workers showed up with harnesses and offered to inspect the brick. Pro bono, stamping its sound. A fire captain stepped from a truck, took one long look, and radioed a line that would show up in the record. No hazard detected. A city clerk who was supposed to file paperwork to advance the demolition lost it for exactly the number of hours the hearing required. Nobody asked how. At noon, a quiet fell across the block, the strange hush before a storm that might not come. Malik pulled Sloane to the centre of the alley. Candles burned down to puddles of wax around them. She was in paint-scarred denim and a shirt that had long since given up, her hair wild, her eyes alive. He cupped her face with both hands. "We may lose," he said. "I know," she whispered. "We will still have this." She nodded, breath catching, tears mixing with the rain like proof they'd kept going. "Say it anyway," she said. "I love you," he answered, simple and irreversible. She laughed on a sob. "I love you back." A horn sounded at the end of the block, low, mechanical, impatient. The first truck crawled into view, a white beast with a claw folded like a threat. People rose from their chairs. Children grabbed each other's hands. Eleanor stepped forward from the crowd without hesitating, shoulder to shoulder with her daughter, eyes fixed on the machine as if she could will it to turn to salt. The truck stopped at the sawhorses someone had set up in defiance and idled. An orange-vested foreman climbed down, scanning the crowd, the candles, the faces painted on the wall and on the people. He held a phone to his ear, listening to someone Sloane could not hear. He nodded once, twice. Malik's fingers laced with Sloane's. The foreman lowered the phone. He lifted his hand, and all at once the claw began to rise. The morning after the unveiling, Sloane woke with her phone vibrating off the nightstand. Headlines filled the screen. Hartley heiress turns on her own. Scandal at Harbour Row. Mural of defiance. She tossed the device aside and pulled the sheets over her head. For years she had thrived on attention. Now it pressed like a weight on her chest. She drove to the wall anyway. The street was already alive. Kids chalking on sidewalks, neighbours pointing out their faces painted into the wings. Malik stood on a ladder, adding tiny highlights along the river. When he saw her, he didn't mention the articles. He just said, "We need more brushes." She laughed, relief flooding. "Then let's get more brushes." They spent the morning repairing edges, sealing corners against rain. Reporters wandered close, snapping pictures, but Malik ignored them. Sloane followed his lead. The wall wasn't for cameras, it was for them. By noon, a black car pulled up at the curb. Eleanor Hartley stepped out, immaculate as ever, heels clicking sharp on the concrete. The crowd hushed. Sloane's heart twisted. "Mother," she said, wiping her palms. Eleanor looked at the mural without emotion. It's vulgar, loud, a billboard for ruin. Malik descended the ladder, expression calm. He didn't speak, waiting. "You've gone too far," Eleanor said to Sloane. "Your father has frozen your accounts. The condo, the car, all of it. Gone." Sloane swallowed. Her cheeks burned, but her voice held. "Then I'll find a way without it." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "For him?" "For me," Sloane answered. "For the first time, for me." The silence stretched. Then Eleanor turned, slid back into the car, and was gone. The crowd exhaled, murmuring. Sloane's knees trembled, but Malik steadied her shoulder with a hand. "Still standing," he said quietly. "Barely," she whispered. "That's enough." That night, Malik invited her inside the workshop instead of the wall. The space smelled of turpentine and coffee, paint cans stacked like sentries. He brewed tea, handed her a chipped mug. "You lost everything," he said, matter of fact. "Not everything," she murmured. "I still have me." And she trailed off, meeting his eyes. "And what?" She took a shaky breath. "And you, if you want me." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached out, brushing a stray curl from her face with paint-rough fingers. "I don't want a trophy, Sloane. I want the woman who showed up barefoot with chalk and listened." Tears prickled her eyes. "That's the only woman I have left." He leaned forward, his forehead against hers, not claiming, not conquering, just steady. "Then she's enough." Days bled into weeks. Without her family's money, Sloane traded her Audi for an old hatchback, her penthouse for a modest apartment above a cafe. She thought she would miss marble countertops and valet parking, but instead she found herself treasuring small things. Neighbours who greeted her by name, children's laughter floating up through open windows, Malik's quiet hum while he cleaned brushes late at night. The mural became a landmark. People came from across the city, then from outside it, to stand before the wings and take photos. But what mattered most were the locals who touched the painted faces and whispered, "That's us." One evening, Devon, the boy with the boots, presented his sketch at the centre, a portrait of Malik painting while the neighbourhood bloomed behind him. The crowd applauded. Malik flushed, uncomfortable, but Sloane caught his hand and squeezed. Later, sitting on the curb, she whispered, "Do you realize you've changed this city?" He shook his head. "I didn't change it. I just gave it a mirror." She leaned against him, the weight of her curves settling into his side, and felt, for once, like she was exactly where she belonged. The Whitmans retaliated with full force. Lawsuits, press releases, whispers in social clubs, articles branded her naive, reckless, infatuated. Some nights the words rattled her, made her doubt. But each morning when she returned to the wall and saw Malik bent over a brush, the doubts scattered like dust. One grey afternoon, rain threatened but held. Sloane found him sitting with a group of teens, teaching shading. He passed a charcoal stick to her. "Show them," he said. "I'm not an artist," she protested. "Then show them you're trying." Her hands shook, but she drew crooked lines, uneven shadows. The kids laughed, not cruel, just honest. Malik grinned. "See, even she messes up. Art isn't about perfection, it's about showing up." Sloane laughed too, cheeks flushed. Something inside her loosened. She had spent years terrified of failure. Here, failure was part of breathing. One night, the city glowed amber and soft. They sat on the steps outside the workshop, sharing a bottle of iced tea. Children's chalk drawings covered the sidewalk. Rockets, butterflies, queens with crooked crowns. Sloane tucked her legs beneath her, hair loose, no makeup. "You know," she whispered, "I used to think I needed a man who made me feel expensive." Malik gazed at the horizon, voice low. "And now? Now I just want someone who sees my value when I'm broke inside." He turned to her, brushed a smudge of paint from her wrist with his thumb. His eyes were steady, warm. "That's the kind of wealth nobody can take," he said. Her throat closed, but she smiled. She leaned against him, their fingers intertwining, and for the first time she felt what safety truly meant. Not walls, not money, not family name. Just this. Love, quiet and unshakable, painted across their lives like colour that could never be scrubbed away. 2 weeks after the unveiling, the notice appeared like a bruise. A laminated sheet zip-tied to the chain-link fence beside the mural. Demolition permit posted. Structure to be removed in 10 days. Someone had slid it in before dawn. By the time Sloane arrived with coffee, the neighborhood had clustered around it, reading the words as if they were a sentence. Malik didn't curse. He reached into his bag, pulled a roll of blue tape, and sealed the notice down the center with an X, the way you dress a wound so it can't split further. They want the wall, he said quietly. They want the land under it. Parking deck expansion, Devon read from his phone. Face tight. Says public benefit. Sloane felt the old life stir in her, the one that negotiated, that shined obstacles until they looked like opportunities. She tamped it down. This wasn't a press release. It was a home. Then we build a bigger crowd than their deck, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. We go to council. Mari's eyes went wide. Can kids talk? They should be first, Sloane said. It's their sky. They moved like a small army made of paper and paint. Flyers bloomed in storefront windows. Save the wings. Sloane turned her living room into a war room. Legal pads, city code printouts, lists of speakers. She created a fund online with a note that said simply, "A wall taught me what home feels like. Help me keep it standing." $5 donations stacked like bricks. $20 notes arrived with messages. My grandmother is painted in those flowers. That river runs through my father's bones. A man in a suit wrote anonymously and gave far more. She didn't look for his name. For once, money didn't need introductions. At the workshop, Malik primed 3 plywood panels with white and let the kids letter them the way voices leave bodies. Bold, crooked, true. We are still here. Homes, not parking. Truth takes space. Nights went long. Sloane dozed at the table with her cheek on a spreadsheet. Malik draped a paint-splattered apron over her shoulders like a blanket. When she startled awake, he was there with tea. No speech, no performance, just warmth. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, then shook her head. "I'm scared." "Good," he said. "It means you care enough to lose." The council chamber smelled like varnish and old arguments. People packed the seats. Neighbours in Sunday shirts, nurses on late break, kids clutching drawings. Sloane smoothed her skirt, the one decent one she had left, and felt absurdly grateful for its stubborn zipper. Malik squeezed her hand once, then let go, leaving courage in its place. Developers spoke first, clean and confident. They clicked through slides. Traffic flow, tax revenue, renderings of a deck wrapped in tasteful ivy. Public benefit, they repeated, as if repetition could birth truth. An attorney emphasized property lines and easements. A banker said the mural could be reimagined on canvas. Sloane watched the council members' faces, bored, polite, a little hungry for lunch. Then a grandmother in a yellow scarf walked to the mic without waiting to be called, her cane clicking time. "This wall remembers my boy," she said. "Parking lots don't remember. They forget." Applause broke and died under the gavel. Mari stepped up on tiptoe. "My mom cleans buildings. She's a queen anyway. I painted her crown. If you take the wall, where does her crown go?" Her voice shook on crown. The room steadied her with a murmur that felt like a hand. Devon unfolded his drawing of the wings and held it high. "I used to think this city hated me. Then I saw my face on a wall. I don't feel invisible anymore." Sloane heard her name called and stood. Her pulse pounded at the base of her throat, old stage fright mixed with a new, raw thing. She didn't bring notes. She brought the room she'd learned to stand in. "I was raised to measure value by square footage and press coverage," she began. "I used to think clean meant quiet, and quiet meant safe. But a wall taught me that safety lives where truth does. This mural pays in a currency you can't count at the bank. Belonging, memory, the kind of pride that stops a kid from shrinking." She swallowed and forced herself to meet the stoniest faces. "If you pave over that, you save 10 minutes of parking time and spend a generation repairing what you flattened." A councilman leaned back, unimpressed. "Miss Hartley, the city can commission another mural elsewhere." She could have argued easements, historic districts, line items. Instead, she said, "You can't move a heart and call it the same." Silence prickled. Then Malik stepped to the mic, paint still caught in his nail beds, shirt rolled at the forearms. He didn't introduce himself. "When I was 12, he said, a landlord put our furniture on the curb. A neighbour saved my mother's wedding photos in a garbage bag and held them like they were newborns. I paint so nothing else goes out on the curb. That's it. That's all. No theatrics. The room changed anyway, not loudly, but like a tide deciding. From the back row, heels clicked. Sloane turned and found her mother standing in the aisle, impeccable as ever, face carved from a single hard decision. Eleanor looked at her, then at the council, then at the mural poster propped on an easel. She did not walk to the mic. She simply lifted her chin and took a seat on Sloane's side of the chamber. Something inside Sloane shifted. No forgiveness, not yet, but a small hinge unsticking. The vote came. The motion to approve demolition failed by one. A second motion emerged like a surprise gift from the city attorney. An emergency designation creating a community heritage overlay. Temporary protection, fast-tracked. Someone had done quiet homework. The measure passed. The room exhaled and then erupted. The gavel banged for order and lost. Outside, sun poured over the steps like paint. Neighbours hugged strangers. Kids waved cardboard signs as if wings could be held in hands. Malik found Sloane in the surge, his smile small and stunned. "You did it," she said. "We," he corrected. Her mother approached, stopping a careful distance away. "It appears you've won," Eleanor said. No warmth, but no venom. Sloane nodded. "You came. I wanted to see what you were willing to lose." A pause. "And what you were willing to build." Eleanor's gaze flicked to Malik and back, 100 judgments dying unsaid. She reached into her bag and handed Sloane a small envelope. Inside was a photograph of Sloane at 6, hands stained with tempera, gap-toothed grin wide under a paper crown. "I kept this," Eleanor said. I'd forgotten why. She cleared her throat, armor clinking. "I don't understand this world of yours, but I will not stand in front of you while you make it." She turned, the heels again, and walked away. Sloane stood frozen with the paper crown from her past lying bright on her palm. Malik looked at the picture and then at her. "Queen since day one," he murmured. They went back to the wall because that's what you do after a victory that only buys time. You make the time matter. Malik patched a hairline crack near the river. Sloane tightened the bolts on a bracket. Devon sketched a new figure at the edge, a boy leaping from a stoop, arms wide, caught between gravity and flight. Weeks folded into a new season. The workshop spilled into the storefront next door, then took over the empty laundromat at the corner. They called it the Wing Works, a place where art jobs paid and elders curated stories like archivists of breath. Sloane learned grant writing the hard way and then the honest way. She traded gowns for a tool belt and a shoebox of thank-you notes. On Friday nights, the block turned into a small festival. Potluck tables, poetry, a rooftop saxophone that sounded like someone laughing toward God. Some afternoons were still brutal. A tag appeared overnight and had to be sanded. A donor withdrew with a polite apology for politics. Rain leaked through a seam they hadn't found. But the wall held, brighter for every scar it learned to wear. One evening, as the sun washed the paint in copper and the river line seemed to run, truly run, Sloane and Malik climbed the scaffolding to touch up the far wingtip. They worked side by side, brushes tapping, talk quiet. Below them, kids chalked hopscotch galaxies on the pavement. Somewhere, a pot of rice steamed. A train sighed. When the last stroke dried, Malik set his brush across the rung and turned. The city spread behind him, imperfect and alive. "I still don't want a trophy," he said softly. "I want a partner who will tell me when my lines drift and fight me when I forget what we promised this wall." Sloane felt the certainty settle in her bones like foundation. "Then marry me to the work," she said, smiling, "and to you." His laugh was low, disbelieving and full. He didn't drop to one knee. He reached out and took both her paint-sticky hands. "Deal," he said, "all of it." Wind curled around them. The bell over the workshop door rang because it liked to ring when joy showed up unannounced. She leaned into him, curve and muscle, breath and paint. It wasn't a grand kiss thrown for cameras. It was a seal set in the small country of 2 hands and 1 promise. Night came soft. They climbed down into the noise of their chosen life. Mari tugged Sloane's sleeve and pressed a sticker into her palm. The gold crown again, this time with a tiny river running through it. "For your hard hat," she said, "when we build the next one." Sloane crouched, eye level with the girl. "Where?" Mari pointed to a blank wall across the street. "Over there, that one's lonely." Sloane looked at Malik. His eyes held the answer she wanted to live inside. They crossed the street together and stood before fresh brick. The future did not ask permission. It asked for primer. Tomorrow, she whispered. "Tomorrow," he said, and laced their fingers. She rested her head against his shoulder. The city hummed around them, not loud, not quiet, just alive. She didn't need applause to know what they had built. She didn't need height to feel safe. Once, she had looked down on Riverton from 31 floors and mistaken distance for peace. Now, with paint under her nails and love at her side, she understood. Safety is not above the world. It is in it, held in steady hands, spoken in children's voices, painted into wings that belong to anyone who needs to rise.